The hidden cost of cruelty. What happens to bullies after they grow up? There is a moment most people never talk about. It happens years after the hallways go quiet, years after the lunchroom empties, years after graduation caps fly into the air. It is the moment when a person who once made others feel small suddenly realizes that the world has grown very large, and they are standing in it completely alone. This is not a story about the people who were bullied. Their pain is real and well documented and deserves every ounce of compassion we can give. This is a different story. This is the story of what happens to the ones who did the bullying. What happens to their careers? What happens to their marriages? What happens inside their minds when the years pile up and the mirrors stop being kind? The research is in. The long-term studies have been completed. And the results might surprise you. Let me tell you about a man named Derek. Derek was the kind of kid every school has. Tall for his age. Loud voice. Quick with an insult. He could read a room the way a predator reads a field. He knew exactly who was weak. He knew exactly who would not fight back. He knew exactly who could be made into an example. In 6th grade, Derek made a boy named Elliot eat dirt behind the gymnasium. He told Elliot that if he said a word to anyone, he would make the next day worse. Elliot believed him because Derek always kept that kind of promise. In 7th grade, Derek moved on to a quiet girl named Priya. She had just transferred from another state. She did not know the social rules yet. Derek exploited that ignorance with surgical precision. He mocked her accent. He knocked her books off her desk. He convinced half the class that she was someone worth avoiding. By 8th grade, Derek had a reputation. Teachers feared confrontation with him. The principal called his mother once, and his mother said boys will be boys. His father said nothing at all because his father had not been home in 2 years. Derek graduated from middle school like a small emperor leaving a conquered territory. He did not look back. He did not think about Elliot. He did not think about Priya. He did not think about the dozens of others who flinched when he walked by. He thought about himself. He always thought about himself. That was the whole problem. Cambridge University conducted one of the most important studies on this subject. Researchers followed a group of children for over 4 decades. They started tracking these kids at age 8 and stayed with them into middle age. The findings were devastating for former bullies. Children who were identified as bullies at age 11 had a criminal conviction rate 4 times higher than their peers. 4 times. That is not a small bump. That is a canyon between 2 very different life outcomes. And it was not limited to petty crime. These were convictions for assault, for theft, for fraud, for domestic violence. The pattern was clear. Something about the habit of dominating others in childhood carried forward like a virus into adult behavior. The researchers did not use the word virus. But when you look at how the pattern spreads from school hallways to office cubicles to living rooms to courtrooms, the metaphor fits. Finland conducted its own national study. Researchers there tracked thousands of children across the country and followed them into adulthood. The results echoed what Cambridge found. Individuals who had been identified as bullies during their school years were 2.5 times more likely to be involved in violent criminal behavior as adults. 2.5 times. Let that number settle into your mind. If the average person has a certain probability of committing a violent act in their lifetime, the former bully has that probability multiplied by 2.5. The Finnish researchers also found elevated rates of substance abuse, elevated rates of unemployment, elevated rates of relationship instability. The picture that emerged was not one of a powerful person who used strength to get ahead. It was a picture of a broken person whose early strategy for survival became a trap they could never escape. Let me go back to Derek. He is 24 now. He has a job at a mid-sized logistics company. He got the job through a connection his uncle had. Derek is good at first impressions. He is charming when he needs to be. He knows how to make people laugh. He knows how to fill a room with energy. His manager likes him at first. His coworkers think he is entertaining at first. But there is a pattern with Derek. It starts small. A comment about a coworker's weight disguised as a joke. A moment where he takes credit for someone else's idea in a meeting. A habit of interrupting people mid-sentence, especially people he considers beneath him. Within 6 months, the office dynamics shift. People stop inviting Derek to lunch. They stop sharing information with him. They route emails around him. They smile to his face and warn new employees behind his back. Derek senses the shift, but he does not understand it. He thinks they are jealous. He thinks they cannot handle his honesty. He thinks the problem is them. It is never him. It is never ever him. This is one of the 4 psychological traits that researchers have identified as common among people who bully others. The first trait is low empathy. This does not mean zero empathy. Derek can watch a sad movie and feel something. He can see a dog limping on the street and feel a twinge in his chest. But when it comes to the people in his daily life, he has a remarkable ability to shut off his awareness of their inner worlds. Psychologists call this an empathy deficit. It does not show up on every test in every situation. It shows up specifically in moments of social conflict. When Derek insults a coworker, he does not feel what that coworker feels. He does not imagine their embarrassment. He does not picture them driving home replaying his words. He does not consider that they might cry in their car in the parking lot. He simply does not go there. His brain has learned to skip that step. And the reason it learned to skip that step is because skipping it was useful. In childhood, when Derek pushed someone down, he needed to not feel their pain in order to keep pushing. Over time, that selective numbing became automatic. The neural pathways for empathy did not develop the way they should have. Neuroscience research has shown that the brain's empathy circuits, particularly the anterior insula and the anterior cingulate cortex, function differently in individuals with a history of aggressive behavior toward peers. These regions light up less. They respond more slowly. They are literally less active when observing someone else in distress. Derek's brain did not break. It adapted. It adapted to a lifestyle of dominance and control. And that adaptation became his greatest liability. The second trait is a self-esteem structure built on hierarchy. Derek does not feel good about himself because he accomplished something meaningful. He does not feel good because he helped someone or created something or grew as a person. He feels good when he is above someone else. His self-worth is entirely relative. It depends on comparison. If he is smarter than the person next to him, he feels smart. If he is funnier than the person across the table, he feels funny. If he is more powerful than the person below him on the organizational chart, he feels powerful. But the moment someone challenges that hierarchy, the moment someone is promoted above him, or outperforms him, or simply refuses to be impressed by him, his entire sense of self collapses. Psychologists call this contingent self-esteem. It looks like confidence from the outside. It sounds like confidence. Derek walks into rooms with his chin up and his voice loud, and people think he must feel great about himself. But it is a house of cards. One gust of wind and the whole thing comes down. Research published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that individuals with contingent self-esteem are significantly more likely to respond to perceived threats with aggression. They lash out not because they are strong but because their inner foundation is so fragile that any crack feels like an earthquake. The third trait is poor emotional regulation. Derek has a temper. Everyone who knows him knows this. He can go from laughing to furious in seconds. A minor inconvenience can trigger a disproportionate reaction. Someone cuts him off in traffic and he tailgates them for a mile. A barista gets his order wrong and he makes a scene. His girlfriend says something he interprets as disrespectful, and he does not speak to her for 3 days. The issue is not that Derek feels strong emotions. Everyone feels strong emotions. The issue is that Derek was never taught how to manage them. And more importantly, his years of bullying taught him the opposite of management. They taught him that emotions are weapons. Anger gets results. Intimidation solves problems. If you feel bad, make someone else feel worse and you will feel better. This is not a conscious strategy. Derek does not wake up in the morning and plan to weaponize his feelings. It happens automatically. It is a reflex built by thousands of repetitions. Neuroplasticity works in both directions. The brain strengthens whatever pathways are used most. If the most used pathway is the one from frustration to aggression, that pathway becomes a superhighway. The pathway from frustration to reflection. From frustration to communication. From frustration to self-soothing. Those pathways remain dirt roads. The fourth trait is an inability to accept personal responsibility. Derek has never in his life said the words "I was wrong" and meant them. He has said them strategically. He has said them when it was clear that refusing to apologize would cost him something he wanted. But he has never felt the genuine internal experience of recognizing his own wrongdoing and sitting with the discomfort of it. This is perhaps the most destructive of the 4 traits because it eliminates the possibility of growth. A person who cannot say "I was wrong" is a person who cannot learn from mistakes. And a person who cannot learn from mistakes is a person who is doomed to repeat them. The psychological term for this is low accountability orientation. It is closely linked to narcissistic tendencies, though not all bullies are narcissists. Some bullies have deeply internalized shame that they protect with an outer wall of blame. The shame is there. It is enormous. But it is buried so deep beneath defensive mechanisms that the person genuinely believes the problem is always external. It is the teacher's fault. The boss's fault. The wife's fault. The system's fault. Society's fault. Anyone's fault but mine. Let me tell you about what happened to Derek's career. He lasted 18 months at the logistics company. He was not fired for a single dramatic incident. He was fired because his manager documented a pattern of hostile behavior toward coworkers. 3 formal complaints were filed. 2 people requested transfers to avoid working with him. His annual review used the phrase "creates a toxic interpersonal environment." Derek was furious. He told his friends the company was poorly managed. He said his boss was threatened by him. He said the coworkers who complained were sensitive and weak. He found another job within 2 months because again he is charming in interviews. He is good at selling himself in short bursts. The cycle repeated. This time it took 14 months. The third job lasted 11 months. Each time the pattern was the same. Early promise. Gradual friction. Escalating conflict. Departure. By the time Derek was 32, he had worked for 6 different companies. His resume was a patchwork. His references were thin. The people who could vouch for his character had stopped returning his calls. This pattern is not unique to Derek. Workplace research from the University of Michigan found that individuals with a history of bullying behavior are significantly overrepresented in workplace harassment cases. They are more likely to be written up for hostile communication. They are more likely to be involved in interpersonal conflicts. They are more likely to be terminated for behavioral reasons. And perhaps most significantly, they are less likely to be promoted into senior leadership positions despite often seeking those positions aggressively. The reason is simple. Modern organizations increasingly value collaboration. They value emotional intelligence. They value the ability to build trust across teams. These are exactly the skills that a lifetime of dominance behavior erodes. Derek wants power. He always has. But the path to power in most professional environments runs through relationships. And relationships are the one thing Derek cannot sustain. Now let me tell you about Derek's personal life. He started dating a woman named Sonia when he was 26. Sonia was warm and patient, and saw something in Derek that she thought was hidden potential. She thought beneath the rough exterior there was a good man trying to get out. This is a common belief among partners of people with aggressive behavioral patterns. It is often sincere. It is almost always wrong. Not because the good does not exist, but because the pattern is stronger than the potential. Derek was attentive at the beginning. He was generous with his time. He remembered small details. He made Sonia feel like the center of the universe. But within a year the dynamic shifted. Derek became critical. He commented on Sonia's clothes. He questioned her friendships. He monitored her phone. He did not hit her. He was not that kind of bully. His violence was verbal and emotional and psychological. He could make Sonia feel stupid with a single sentence. He could make her doubt her own memory with a carefully constructed version of events that contradicted what she knew had happened. He could make her feel guilty for being upset by something he did. Psychologists call this gaslighting. It is a form of emotional abuse that is remarkably common among individuals who bullied others in childhood. The skill set transfers perfectly. The ability to identify vulnerability. The ability to exploit it. The ability to deny what happened. The ability to make the victim feel responsible. Research from the University of Washington's longitudinal study on relationships found that individuals with a history of peer aggression in childhood are significantly more likely to engage in controlling behavior in romantic partnerships. They are more likely to use threats and intimidation. They are more likely to isolate their partners from support networks. They are more likely to escalate conflicts to the point of emotional or physical harm. And critically, they are more likely to see their behavior as normal. Derek does not think he is controlling. He thinks he is protective. He does not think he is critical. He thinks he has high standards. He does not think he is manipulative. He thinks he is strategic. The lens through which he views his own behavior is distorted by decades of reinforcement. Every time he dominated someone, and got what he wanted. His brain recorded a success. Every time he intimidated someone into compliance, his reward circuits fired. The behavior was reinforced thousands of times. It became not just a habit but an identity. Sonia left after 2 years. She did not leave dramatically. She left quietly one Tuesday morning while Derek was at work. She packed 2 suitcases and went to her sister's house and changed her phone number. Derek was stunned. He called her sister. He called her friends. He showed up at her workplace. He oscillated between rage and despair in a way that frightened the people around him. He could not understand how someone could just leave. He could not understand that what he interpreted as love was experienced by Sonia as captivity. This gap in perception. This canyon between how Derek sees himself and how others experience him. This is the central tragedy of the bully's adult life. They are often genuinely confused by the consequences of their behavior. They are not pretending. They truly do not understand why people leave, why friendships end, why colleagues avoid them, why their children grow up and stop calling. The empathy deficit that made them effective bullies in childhood makes them blind to the wreckage they create in adulthood. Let me tell you about the neuroscience because it matters. The human brain is designed to learn from social feedback. When you say something that hurts someone, and you see the pain on their face, your brain registers that feedback and adjusts your behavior. This is how we learn social norms. This is how we develop kindness. This is how we build the intricate web of mutual consideration that makes human society possible. But in the bully's brain, this feedback loop is disrupted. The anterior insula, which processes empathic pain responses, is less active. The prefrontal cortex, which governs impulse control and long-term decision-making, is often underactive in moments of social conflict. And critically, the reward system, the nucleus accumbens and the ventral tegmental area, shows increased activation in response to dominance displays. This means the bully's brain is literally rewarding aggressive behavior. It feels good to dominate. It feels good to win. It feels good to see someone submit. This is not a moral failing in the traditional sense. It is a neurological pattern that was established early and reinforced repeatedly. But understanding the neuroscience does not excuse the behavior. It explains why the behavior is so resistant to change. It explains why Derek at 32 is still doing the same things he did at 12. The brain has been shaped by 2 decades of the same input. Changing it requires enormous effort, sustained therapy, genuine motivation, and above all, the one thing most bullies lack: the willingness to admit there is a problem. Let me tell you about another person. Her name is Vanessa. Vanessa was not a physical bully. She never pushed anyone. She never threw a punch. Vanessa was a social bully. She was the queen of exclusion. In high school, she ran a group of 6 girls who decided the social hierarchy of the entire class. They decided who was in and who was out. They decided who could sit at which table. They decided whose reputation would be destroyed that week. Vanessa orchestrated this with the calm efficiency of a corporate executive. She never got her hands dirty. She whispered instructions. She planted rumors. She smiled at you while her lieutenant told the entire class you were sleeping around. By senior year, Vanessa had driven 3 girls to transfer schools. One of them attempted suicide. Vanessa heard about it and said she was probably just doing it for attention. Vanessa went to a good college. She rushed a sorority. She replicated the same social structure she had built in high school. She identified the weakest members and marginalized them. She built alliances based on fear and mutual complicity. She graduated with honors because she was intelligent. Cruelty and intelligence are not mutually exclusive. In fact, research suggests that social bullies often have above-average cognitive abilities, particularly in the area of social cognition. They understand social dynamics extremely well. They read people accurately. They know how to manipulate group dynamics. This is sometimes called the skilled manipulator profile. It looks like leadership. It can even be mistaken for charisma. But the difference between a leader and a manipulator is the direction of their intent. A leader builds others up because the group succeeding is the goal. A manipulator builds others up only when it serves their own position and tears them down when it does too. Vanessa got a job in marketing at a large firm. She was promoted quickly. She was good at presentations. She was good at client relationships. She was good at the performance of competence and confidence. But within her team the same pattern emerged. She took credit for others' work. She undermined colleagues who threatened her status. She created an environment of competition and fear that some team members described as suffocating. Her direct reports had the highest turnover rate in the department. HR noticed. Her manager noticed. But Vanessa was producing results, so the company looked the other way. This is something that happens more often than people realize. Organizations sometimes enable adult bullies because the bully is profitable. The cost of their behavior is distributed across the people they damage while the benefits accrue visibly to the company. This is the institutional version of the bystander effect. Everyone sees the problem. No one stops it. Because stopping it is expensive, and the damage is happening to someone else. Vanessa's personal life followed a different but equally destructive pattern. She did not have trouble attracting partners. She was attractive and confident and socially skilled. She had trouble keeping them. Every relationship she entered followed a predictable arc: intense beginning, gradual control, escalating criticism, explosive end. Her partners often described feeling like they were constantly performing, like they were always being evaluated, like they could never relax because one wrong move would trigger Vanessa's cold withdrawal. She used silence as a weapon. She could go days without speaking to her partner, and then act as if nothing had happened. This is a form of emotional punishment that psychologists call stonewalling. Research by the Gottman Institute identifies stonewalling as one of the 4 most destructive behaviors in romantic relationships. It is a predictor of divorce. It is a predictor of partner depression. It is a predictor of relationship dissolution. And it is remarkably common among individuals who engaged in relational aggression during their formative years. By the time Vanessa was 38, she had been married and divorced twice. She had a daughter from her first marriage. The daughter, whose name was Lily, was 8 years old and already showing signs of anxiety. Lily was afraid of making mistakes. She was afraid of her mother's disapproval. She was a quiet child who tried very hard to be perfect because she had learned early that imperfection was punished with coldness. Vanessa did not see this. She thought she was raising a disciplined child. She thought Lily's anxiety was just sensitivity. She told her daughter to toughen up. This is how the cycle perpetuates itself. The bully does not recognize the damage, because recognizing it would require the empathy they never developed. and their children grow up in an environment shaped by the same dynamics the bully created in every other area of their life. Control, criticism, conditional love. The research on intergenerational transmission of aggressive behavior is extensive. A meta-analysis published in the journal Psychological Bulletin found that children of parents who display aggressive interpersonal patterns are significantly more likely to develop similar patterns themselves. The behavior passes from generation to generation not through genetics alone but through modeling. Children learn how to treat people by watching how their parents treat people. Lily is watching. Let me talk about what happens inside the mind of the aging bully because this is where the story becomes genuinely tragic. Derek is now 45. He has been through 2 more relationships since Sonia. Both ended badly. He has a teenage son he sees every other weekend. The son is polite but distant. The son has learned that engaging with his father's emotional volatility is not worth the risk. Derek interprets his son's distance as disrespect. He does not see it for what it is. Self-protection. Derek's career has plateaued. He is a mid-level manager at a company that tolerates him because he has been there long enough that firing him would be complicated. He is not respected. He is endured. His team does the minimum required and saves their best ideas for other managers. Derek eats lunch alone most days. He tells himself it is because he prefers it that way. At night, Derek experiences something he would never admit to anyone. He feels a deep, pervasive, unshakable sense of emptiness. It is not sadness exactly. It is more like an absence. A hollow space where connection should be. He scrolls through his phone and sees people living lives full of friendship and warmth and belonging, and he feels something he cannot name. It is the feeling of a person who has spent their entire life pushing people away and has finally succeeded. Research from the United Kingdom's National Child Development Study, one of the longest-running longitudinal studies in history, found that adults who were identified as bullies in childhood reported significantly higher rates of depression and anxiety than their peers. This seems counterintuitive. The bully is the strong one. The bully is the one in control. But that is the illusion. The bully's strength is a performance. Beneath it is almost always a reservoir of pain that was never processed. Derek's father left when he was 10. His mother was overwhelmed and emotionally unavailable. He learned early that vulnerability was dangerous and that the only way to survive was to be the most threatening person in any room. That strategy worked in childhood. It is destroying him in adulthood. The psychological term for what is happening to Derek is maladaptive coping persistence. It means he is using a survival strategy from childhood in an adult context where it no longer works. Imagine a person who grew up in a house that flooded frequently. They learned to build walls around their belongings to keep the water out. Now they live in a desert. There is no water anywhere. But they are still building walls. They are still bracing for a flood that will never come. And those walls are keeping out not water but people. This is Derek. This is Vanessa. This is every person who learned in childhood that aggression was the answer and never updated the equation. I want to tell you about one more person. His name is Marcus. Marcus was a bully in middle school. He was not as extreme as Derek. He was more of a follower. He joined in when the group targeted someone. He laughed at the cruel jokes. He participated in the exclusion. He was not the leader, but he was a willing participant. After high school, Marcus went to community college. He got a job in construction. he worked hard. He got married young to a woman named Rachel. They had 2 kids. Marcus was not a bad husband. He was not controlling or abusive. But he had a short temper. He yelled more than he should have. He said things in anger that he could not take back. And he had a persistent habit of diminishing people with humor. He would make jokes at his wife's expense in front of friends. He would tease his children in ways that left them confused about whether their father was joking or serious. It was the low-grade version of what he had done in school. Not dramatic enough to be called abuse, but persistent enough to erode trust. When Marcus was 35, his daughter came home from school crying. She said a group of girls had excluded her from a birthday party. They had told her she was not cool enough to be invited. Marcus felt something he did not expect. He felt rage. Not at his daughter. At the girls. And then beneath the rage he felt something else. A recognition. A nauseating flash of memory. He had done this exact thing. He had been part of a group that excluded a kid named Thomas from every social event for an entire year. He remembered the look on Thomas's face. He had not thought about Thomas in 20 years. But sitting there watching his daughter cry, he saw Thomas's face superimposed on hers and something inside him cracked open. This is what psychologists call a moral awakening. It does not happen to everyone. Many bullies go their entire lives without experiencing it. But when it does happen, it is often triggered by seeing the pain they caused reflected in someone they love. Marcus could not protect himself from empathy when it was his daughter's face. The defenses he had built against feeling other people's pain were not designed to withstand this. His daughter was inside the walls. And through her pain he suddenly felt the pain of every person he had ever mocked or excluded or diminished. It hit him all at once. He went to the garage and sat in his truck and cried for 20 minutes. He had not cried since he was a child. Marcus did something that Derek and Vanessa never did. He sought help. He found a therapist. He told the therapist he needed to understand why he was the way he was. The therapist began working with him on what is called cognitive behavioral restructuring. This is a process where you identify the automatic thoughts and beliefs that drive your behavior and systematically challenge them. Marcus discovered that beneath his quick temper and his habit of diminishing others was a deep belief that he was not good enough. He had grown up with a father who criticized everything he did. Nothing was ever right. His grades were never high enough. His athletic performance was never strong enough. His father used shame as a motivational tool, and Marcus internalized the message that his worth depended on being better than others. Bullying was not about the victims. It was about Marcus trying to outrun his own sense of inadequacy. This is consistent with what researchers call the compensatory aggression model. It proposes that many bullies are not acting from a position of genuine confidence but from a desperate need to suppress their own feelings of shame and inadequacy. By making someone else feel small, they temporarily feel large. By making someone else look foolish, they temporarily feel smart. By making someone else feel excluded, they temporarily feel included. It is a psychological painkiller. And like all painkillers, it is addictive, and it does not treat the underlying condition. It just numbs it long enough to get through the day. Marcus's therapy lasted 3 years. It was not easy. There were sessions where he wanted to quit. There were moments where confronting his own behavior made him physically sick. He had to sit with the reality that he had caused genuine harm to real people. He had to accept that he could not undo that harm. He could only change what he did going forward. He went to Rachel and told her he was sorry. Not for a specific incident. For a pattern. For years of small cruelties that he had disguised as humor. Rachel cried. She told him she had been thinking about leaving. She told him she loved him, but she could not keep living with someone who made her feel small in front of their friends. Marcus heard this. Really heard it. And he did not defend himself. He did not explain. He did not minimize. He said, "I understand, and I am going to do the work to be different." This was the hardest sentence Marcus had ever spoken because it required the one thing bullies resist most: accountability. Marcus tried to find Thomas. He searched social media. He asked people from their school. He eventually found an email address and wrote a letter. It was not long. It said, "I was part of a group that excluded you for a year in middle school. I remember it. I am sorry. I know this does not fix anything, but I wanted you to know that I know what I did and I am ashamed of it." Thomas wrote back 2 weeks later. He said thank you. He said that year was the worst year of his life. He said he had carried the pain of it into adulthood. He said he had struggled with trust and social anxiety for decades. He said Marcus's letter did not erase the damage, but it mattered. It mattered to know that someone remembered. That someone acknowledged it. That someone was sorry. I want to pause here and talk about what Thomas represents because his experience is backed by substantial research. The effects of being bullied are severe and long-lasting. A study published in JAMA Psychiatry found that individuals who were bullied in childhood had significantly higher rates of anxiety disorders, depressive disorders, and suicidal ideation in adulthood. The effects were comparable to those of child abuse. This is not hyperbole. The data supports the comparison. Being systematically targeted by peers during the developmental years when the brain is building its models of social reality causes lasting neurological and psychological damage. The hippocampus, which processes memory and stress responses, can be measurably smaller in adults who were bullied as children. The amygdala, which processes threat detection, can be measurably more reactive. These are physical changes to the brain. They are not character weakness. They are not sensitivity. They are the biological consequences of sustained interpersonal trauma. Thomas is 45 now. He is a software engineer. He is married to a kind man named James. He has a good life by most external measures. But he still struggles. He still walks into a room full of people and feels his heart rate spike. He still assumes that new acquaintances are evaluating him and finding him lacking. He still has dreams about middle school. Not nightmares exactly. More like echoes. Scenes that replay with perfect emotional fidelity. The feeling of standing alone while everyone moves away. The feeling of being invisible and hypervisible at the same time. The feeling of knowing that the laughter is about you. These experiences shaped Thomas's brain during a critical period of development, and the impressions they left are permanent in the way that all formative experiences are permanent. They can be processed. They can be managed. They can be integrated into a larger story of resilience and growth. But they do not disappear. Marcus's letter helped. It was a small piece of something Thomas had needed for 30 years. Acknowledgement. Now I want to bring these threads together because the research points to a conclusion that is both simple and profound. Bullying damages everyone. It damages the victim in obvious and well-documented ways. But it also damages the perpetrator in ways that are less obvious, but equally devastating over the long term. The bully's brain adapts to a pattern of behavior that is effective in the short-term social environment of childhood but catastrophically maladaptive in the complex relational landscape of adulthood. The skills that make a successful bully: dominance, manipulation, emotional suppression, refusal to accept blame. These are the exact skills that make an unsuccessful adult. They lead to career stagnation. They lead to relationship failure. They lead to social isolation. They lead to depression and anxiety and substance abuse. They lead to a life that looks from the outside like it should work but feels from the inside like it is falling apart. The British research I mentioned earlier, the one that tracked children for 40 years, it found something else that does not get discussed enough. The former bullies were not happy. They were not thriving. Despite whatever social advantages they had gained in childhood, they were as a group less satisfied with their lives than almost any other category of participant. Less satisfied than the kids who were average. Less satisfied than the kids who were shy. Less satisfied in some measures than the kids who were bullied. This last finding is controversial, and I want to be careful with it. I am not saying that being bullied is better than being a bully. The victims carry enormous pain. But the data suggests that the bully's pain is of a particular kind. It is the pain of a person who never learned how to connect. And human beings need connection the way they need oxygen. You can survive without it for a while. But you cannot thrive. You cannot be well. You slowly suffocate in a room full of air because the problem is not the environment. The problem is inside your lungs. Let me tell you about one more study because it illuminates something important about the biology of bullying. Researchers at the University of Chicago conducted brain imaging studies on adolescents with conduct disorder, a clinical diagnosis that includes persistent bullying behavior. They showed these adolescents videos of people in pain. In typical adolescence, the brain regions associated with empathy activated strongly. The anterior insula lit up. The anterior cingulate cortex responded. The mirror neuron system engaged. In the adolescents with conduct disorders, something different happened. The empathy regions were less active. But the reward regions were more active. The brain was not just failing to empathize with the pain of others. It was finding pleasure in it. This is a critical finding. It means that for some individuals the act of causing pain is neurologically rewarding in the same way that food or sex or drugs are rewarding. The dopamine system responds to dominance displays. The brain says this feels good. Do it again. And so they do it again. And again. And again. Until the behavior is so deeply embedded in their neural architecture that changing it requires the kind of sustained therapeutic intervention that most people never pursue. This does not mean bullies are monsters. This does not mean they are beyond redemption. Marcus proved that change is possible. But Marcus is the exception, not the rule. Most bullies do not have the experience of seeing their daughter cry and recognizing themselves in the cruelty. Most bullies do not seek therapy. Most bullies do not write letters of apology. Most bullies follow the trajectory that Derek and Vanessa followed. Escalating consequences. Deteriorating relationships. Deepening isolation, growing despair, and through it all an unshakable conviction that the problem is everyone else. I want to talk about what happens to the aging bully because there is a chapter of this story that rarely gets told. Derek is 55 now. His son is in college and they talk once a month on the phone. The calls last about 8 minutes. Derek does most of the talking. His son says yes and okay and that sounds good, and then says he has to go. Derek's second marriage ended 5 years ago. His ex-wife told the mediator that living with Derek was like living with a wall. He was physically present but emotionally unreachable. Derek lives alone in an apartment. He goes to work. He comes home. He watches television. He drinks more than he should. He has a handful of acquaintances from a sports league but no close friends. No one who knows his middle name. No one who would notice if he missed a week. No one who would come to the hospital if he were sick. This is the loneliness that research predicts for individuals who never develop the capacity for genuine emotional connection. It is not the dramatic loneliness of a person stranded on an island. It is the quiet loneliness of a person surrounded by people who have all learned to keep their distance. Derek sometimes wonders how he got here. He remembers being popular. He remembers being feared, which he mistook for being respected. He remembers the feeling of power he had in school when everyone moved out of his way. He does not understand that the moving out of his way was not respect. It was avoidance. And avoidance is what he has now. An entire life built on avoidance. He avoids vulnerability. Others avoid him. The symmetry is perfect and perfectly devastating. Derek's health is deteriorating. Research shows that chronic social isolation is a health risk comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It increases inflammation. It weakens immune function. It accelerates cognitive decline. It increases the risk of cardiovascular disease. Derek does not know this research. But his body knows. His blood pressure is high. He sleeps poorly. He gets sick more often than he used to. His doctor tells him to reduce stress. Derek does not know how to reduce stress because his entire existence is stressful. Every interaction carries the potential for conflict. Every relationship carries the potential for rejection. Every day carries the weight of a lifetime of unprocessed pain. Vanessa's story has a different texture but the same underlying structure. She is 52. She is on her third marriage. This one is to a man who is passive and deferential and allows Vanessa to control every aspect of their shared life. She finally found a partner who will not leave. But the partnership is hollow. There is no intimacy. There is no mutual growth. There is a dominant person and a compliant person, and the space between them is filled with nothing. Vanessa's daughter Lily is 22 now. She lives across the country. She chose a college as far from her mother as possible. She calls on holidays. The calls are brief and carefully neutral. Lily is in therapy working through the effects of growing up with a mother whose love was conditional on perfection and compliance. Lily's therapist has helped her understand that her mother's behavior was not about her. It was about Vanessa's inability to relate to other human beings as anything other than objects to be managed. This understanding helps. But it does not make the holidays less painful. And then there is Marcus. Marcus is 50 now. He is still married to Rachel. Their relationship is not perfect, but it is real. They argue sometimes. They disagree. But they also repair. They apologize. They listen. Marcus learned how to listen in therapy, and it changed everything. Listening. Genuine listening. The kind where you are not formulating your response while the other person is speaking. The kind where you are actually trying to understand what someone else is experiencing. This skill, which most people develop in childhood, Marcus had to learn at 35. But he learned it. And it transformed his relationships. His children respect him. They actually want to spend time with him. They bring their friends home. They tell him things they are afraid of. They trust him. This is the reward of the work Marcus did. Not perfection. Trust. The most valuable currency in human relationships. Marcus still thinks about the people he hurt. Not obsessively. Not with paralyzing guilt. But with a steady awareness that he caused harm and that the harm was real and that he has a responsibility to live differently because of it. He volunteers with a program that works with adolescents who display aggressive behavior. He tells them his story. He tells them what the research says. He tells them that the thing that feels like strength is actually a trap. He tells them that the rush they feel when they dominate someone is a chemical lie. Their brain is telling them they are winning, but they are actually losing. They are losing the ability to connect. They are losing the ability to trust. They are losing the ability to be known. And being known is the whole point of being alive. I want to end with something the research makes clear but that our culture often ignores. Bullying is not a phase. It is not something kids grow out of. It is not boys being boys or girls being girls. It is a behavioral pattern that reshapes the brain and predicts poor outcomes across every domain of adult life. The child who bullies at 11 is statistically more likely to have a criminal record, more likely to have failed relationships, more likely to struggle with substance abuse, more likely to experience depression and anxiety, more likely to be lonely at 50. The data is overwhelming and consistent across multiple countries, multiple decades, and multiple research methodologies. The habit of causing harm to others does not dissolve with age. It calcifies. It becomes the architecture of a life. And the life it builds is one that looks from the outside like it might be successful but feels from the inside like a prison with no walls. If you were bullied, I want you to know something. The pain you carry is real. It is valid. It is not your fault. And the person who caused it is almost certainly paying a price they do not even understand. This is not said to minimize your suffering. Nothing minimizes your suffering. This is said because the research shows that cruelty is expensive. It costs the victim dearly. But it also costs the perpetrator in ways that compound over decades until the bill becomes unpayable. And if you were the bully, I want you to know something too. It is not too late. Marcus was 35 when he began to change. The brain retains its plasticity throughout life. The neural pathways that were built by aggression can be weakened by disuse and replaced by pathways built through empathy and accountability and genuine human connection. It requires work. It requires therapy. It requires the courage to look at yourself honestly and say, I have been causing harm and I want to stop. Most people who need to do this work will not do it. The defenses are too strong. The identity is too entrenched. The fear of what lies beneath the armor is too overwhelming. But for those who find the courage, the research is clear. Change is possible. Connection is possible. A different life is possible. It starts with the one thing bullies fear most: vulnerability. The willingness to be seen not as the strongest person in the room but as a person. Just a person. Flawed and frightened and trying like everyone else to figure out how to be human without destroying everything they touch. The science tells us that what we do to others we ultimately do to ourselves. The brain does not distinguish between harm directed outward and harm experienced inward. Every act of cruelty rewires the aggressor's brain in ways that make future happiness harder to achieve. Every act of dominance weakens the neural circuits that enable love and trust and belonging. Every time a bully makes someone feel small, they are also making their own world smaller. The walls they build to keep others out eventually become the walls that keep them in. And by the time they realize what has happened, the walls are very high, and the space inside is very dark, and the only sound is the echo of their own voice asking why everyone left. The research spanning decades and continents and thousands of individual lives leads to one inescapable conclusion. Bullying is an act of self-destruction disguised as an act of power. It destroys the victim's present, but it destroys the bully's future. And neither destruction was ever necessary. Neither was ever inevitable. Both can be prevented. Both can be healed. But only if we stop pretending that cruelty is strength. Only if we stop excusing aggression as confidence. Only if we start telling the truth about what the data actually shows. The bully does not win. The bully never wins. The bully simply takes longer to lose.